At the same time, Stephen's Hollywood colleague William Wyler and his camera teams were filming in the south of France, where remnants of the Wehrmacht were still trying to hold Marseilles, while French troops were combating the last pockets of resistance. The resistance had already occupied strategic positions in the city centre. Street after street was searched to check for German snipers.
The next day, the Germans surrendered. After liberation, the search began for those who had collaborated with the hated enemy. A suspect's mother says goodbye to her son, who is then taken away by resistance fighters. Power in Marseille passed into the hands of left-wing forces of the resistance movement. The Americans were tolerated, but, as far as possible, were expected to stay out of the city and to push further north. Concerned that his country might become divided, General de Gaulle diffused the situation with a trick. The paramilitary groups were quickly integrated into the French army.
Hitler had already ordered a withdrawal from southern France on August the 17th, 1944. Nearly 300,000 German troops were able to pull back. The wounded were left behind in field hospitals to be captured and were taken to prisoner of war camps. The Allies' successes had had a demoralizing effect on the enemy. Many simply gave up. Their attitude now was,
"It's all over, so bugger them. Now we're going to surrender."
as Hitler's blitzkrieg warriors. In 1940, they had overrun France in just a few weeks. Now the sad remnants were being taken prisoner. In the summer of 1944, the Wehrmacht lost nearly 240,000 men, killed or wounded. 200,000 German troops were first interned in provisional detention camps. After his resounding success with Memphis Belle, William Wyler wanted to make a documentary film about the American fighter aircraft who were attacking German units or convoys behind the front. But his teams never succeeded in showing US Thunderbolts in action. His camera teams were only able to capture the results of their attacks. In the opinion of cameraman Karl Maslowski, Wyler used far too many rolls of colour film without rhyme or reason.
In my whole career, I have never seen such a disgraceful waste of precious film material.
But sometimes there were exceptions. Near Lyon, a squadron of Thunderbolts had destroyed a Wehrmacht bus. Wyler's team photographed the enemy dead.
A second team followed the advancing Americans towards the Swiss border. In the Jura Mountains in eastern France, the village of La Charme had been almost completely destroyed by US fighter aircraft. Its inhabitants gave their liberators a somewhat lukewarm reception. But in other places, it was a different story. This German lance corporal is lucky. He has even been given a glass of red wine.
By September 1944, virtually the whole of France was free again. Only in Alsace and Lorraine, the two regions annexed by the Wehrmacht in 1940, were the Americans still facing fierce resistance. William Wyler ended his filming. His sole aim now was to get to Mulhouse, the town where he was born and where his parents ran a haberdashery business before emigrating to America.
The color film reporters with the Panorama weekly newsreel were still filming in the autumn of 1944. Here, cameraman Karl Sonntag is out on the Baltic with some of the German Navy's net-laying ships. "18 net-laying vessels had been tasked with blocking harbor entrances or important shipping routes to prevent submarines, torpedoes, or frogmen getting through. Scenes like these were intended to make cinema-goers in neutral countries think that Hitler and the Wehrmacht had taken every measure to prevent the Allies from achieving further successes.
The Nazi propaganda ministry was still placing its faith in entertainment. Cameraman Karl Falke was sent to Breslau in Silesia to film a performance by the Bush Circus. Master Ullman, with his 12 Arab stallions and tightrope walker Dolinda, delighted the audience, which also contained SS and regular army soldiers.
Around this time, journalist Ruth Andreas Friedrich noted in her diary that
"We are making an effort, with thoughts and wishes, with hopes, aspirations and expectations. Hardly a day passes without us talking about final victory, our final victory. Will we see it this year, or will we have to wait until next year? On the Western Front, they seem to be taking a breather."
with a massive array of men and material, the Western Allies had liberated France and reached the borders of the Reich. Their biggest problem now was not the Wehrmacht, but supplies. Because of the speed of their advance in August and September, the Allies had to wait for fresh troops, arms, and ammunition to be transported to the front from ports in Normandy and the Provence. To the disappointment of the British, the final decision on further action rested with the Allies' American commander-in-chief. Montgomery, in the meantime promoted to Field Marshal, wanted to make a quick thrust into the Ruhr industrial region. But General Eisenhower continued to place his faith in the superior strength of his forces.
George Stevens and his team also had to wait. Midway between Paris and Reims, they halted for a while in Château-Thierry on the River Marne. High above the small town stands a huge monument commemorating the dead of the First World War. In May 1918, the area saw months of fierce fighting between German troops and units of the American Expeditionary Force, which had been sent to the front in support of the hard-pressed French army. Stevens and his men were well aware that the Second World War still wasn't over. Pessimists reckoned that the fighting could last into 1946 and cost many more American lives. Next to the graves from July 1918, there were now new wooden crosses for GIs who had only recently lost their lives.
American war reporter Jack Leap and his colleagues traveled to the Ardennes to meet up once again with General Lightning Joe Collins. The headquarters of the US 1st Infantry Division was located in Houffalize in Belgium. Collins and his team were preparing to advance across the border into the German Reich. The civilian population had no idea that the Germans would return during the Ardennes offensive of December 1944 and that Allied bombers would reduce their town to rubble. But for now, everything was going to plan, and American troops were given the order to attack the imperial city of Aachen.
At the Nazi bulwark known as the Siegfried Line, Jack Leap filmed these children, symbols of innocence in a time of horror. Hitler's suicide and Germany's unconditional surrender was still 8 months away, 8 months in which millions of soldiers, civilians, and concentration camp inmates would become further victims of the dictator's crimes against humanity.